Hello, I'm Cheryl Atkinson. Welcome to Full Measure. For the few who have seen them, they're known as the 28 pages. They constitute a small portion of the much larger report that was classified under the George W. Bush administration and are still hidden from public view today under President Obama. There are bipartisan calls to make them public, and those voices have been raised again in the wake of recent attacks claimed by ISIS. There are also accusations that those who want to keep them classified aren't protecting national security interests, but something or somebody else. It was the morning of September 11, 2001.
Two planes apparently crashed into each tower.
As the eyes of the world were fixed on the terrorist attacks, a special election was being held in Massachusetts, where Stephen Lynch quietly won a vacant congressional seat. So it may be fitting that today, Congressman Lynch is devoting a great deal of effort to revealing long-held secrets from Congress's 9/11 investigation. There's 28 pages that looks like redaction.
Yeah, and when I read it, I thought, this information is something that the public should have.
No ordinary American can view them, and members of Congress sworn to secrecy are only permitted to read the 28 pages under strict conditions.
She had to make an appointment with the Intelligence Committee and also go to a secure location. They take your pen, paper, electronics, you sit in a room and they watch as you read it.
In October of 2013, Lynch went to the secret room in the basement of the Capitol and began reading. The censored material begins on page 395 under the heading, Certain Sensitive National Security Matters. As you're reading the pages, what kind of realization was coming to your mind?
It gave names of individuals and entities that I believe were complicit in the attacks on September 11th. They were facilitators of those attacks. They are clearly identified. How people were financed, where they were housed, where the money was coming from, the conduits that were used, and the connections between some of these individuals.
Individuals, he says, who were never brought to justice. But who are they, and why would the U.S. government want to keep the information secret? Former Senator Bob Graham thinks he knows. He co-authored the congressional report, including the 28 pages.
Here are some facts. The Saudis know what they did. Second, the Saudis know that we know what they did.
Graham has become a relentless advocate for releasing the records. He goes so far as to say the 9/11 Islamic extremist hijackers were only successful due to direct support from prominent Saudis named in the 28 pages. The Saudis deny that. 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi. Their leaders, al-Qaeda mastermind Osama bin Laden, was part of a powerful Saudi family with close ties to the royal family.
The position of the United States government has been to protect Saudi Arabia at virtually every step of the judicial process.
And that may be the problem. Could the 28 pages unravel the alliance between the U.S. and a close Arab ally in the Mideast? Terry Strada of New Jersey thinks that relationship is secondary to her right to know what's in the withheld pages. She lost her husband Tom, a bond broker, in the World Trade Center on 9/11. The couple's third child was just 4 days old. She's leading a fight to expose the names of those in the 28 pages who allegedly provided the means for the terrorists.
Without money, terrorist organizations cannot exist. It is the lifeblood of terrorism. As long as there are well-funded terrorist organizations out there vowing to kill and destroy us here on our homeland and abroad, we will never be safe.
Strada's coalition has made repeated pleas in letters to President Obama.
We have not heard back from the administration at all.
Has someone put an official reason out there for why this is still classified?
Having read the 28 pages, I think it's to allow those individuals to escape accountability.
Plenty of Democrats and Republicans have supported the need for secrecy over the years on national security or other grounds. We contacted more than a dozen key members of Congress, but none of them would discuss their position on camera. Former Congressman Pete Hoekstra read the 28 pages a decade ago when he headed the House Intelligence Committee.
I think it's in terms of diplomatic relationships, maybe very, very sensitive.
Today, Hoekstra is a business consultant, and he agreed to explain the rationale of those protecting the secrecy of the 28 pages because of what they imply about Saudi Arabia or other U.S. allies.
I think they're concerned that it may be embarrassing to the countries or the individuals that are talked about in that section, and it's a complication that they'd rather not deal with. They're just saying, we've got enough problems. We've got to deal with ISIS, we've got to deal with Iran, we've got to deal with al-Qaeda.
Reports of a Saudi connection to 9/11 were furthered by none other than 9/11 conspirator Zacarias Moussaoui. Last year, the al-Qaeda member gave rare prison testimony for victims' families suing Saudi Arabia for allegedly supporting terrorism. Moussaoui testified it was his job in the late 90s to create a database of al-Qaeda donors. On that list, he claimed, were important Saudi royal family members and officials. Attorney for the victims, the money that was coming from the Saudi donors, how important was it to bin Laden's ability to maintain the organization? Moussaoui, it was crucial. Without the money of the Saudis, you will have nothing. It was absolutely fundamental. Lawyers for Saudi Arabia deny any link to terrorism. They say there's no evidence the Saudis supported or caused the attacks, calling Moussaoui's comments colorful but immaterial hearsay from a convicted terrorist diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. The Saudi embassy declined our interview request and referred us to a 2003 statement that said any idea they funded, organized, or even knew about September 11th is malicious and blatantly false. We can deal with questions in public, but we cannot respond to blank pages. Today, there's bipartisan support in Congress for a bill urging President Obama to release the 28 pages. And Hoekstra says today, 14 years after 9/11, he'd have to come down on the side of disclosure.
I really can't come up with a good reason at this point in time anymore to keep the pages classified.
For now, when it comes to fully understanding the deadliest terrorist attacks on American soil, what some view as a central chapter is written but remains untold. What do you think Tom would think, and what would he say about this particular issue?
He would be laughing and saying, you go get him, Terry, you go get him. Don't let them get away with this. Don't let them hide the truth, and don't let the people that were behind it not pay, not be held accountable.
Information such as this, on such a profound scale, should definitely be in the custody of the American public. We should know about this. This will inform us. This will help us. And there's no reason why this information should not be made public.
We contacted the White House to ask about the status of the 28 pages and the prospect of their public release. What they offered was a statement from a year ago saying they requested that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence review the 28 pages for declassification. That office, they say, is currently coordinating the required interagency review, and it is ongoing. This cold and flu season, the Centers for Disease Control issued a new health alert about a mysterious virus responsible for nightmare scenarios. A child wakes up and his legs don't move, or he doesn't wake up at all. Enterovirus D68 hit the U.S. with a vengeance last year, mimicking one of the world's most feared illnesses, polio. And the medical mysteries of where it came from and why have yet to be unraveled. The mystery virus hit Seabrook, New Hampshire last year, disguised as a simple cold infecting teenager Dan Dugan. His father, Patrick.
We had taken him to his pediatrician a few times over the course of a couple of weeks, but they said, oh no, it's just a bug, it's going around, don't worry about it.
But it was something much worse. Dan woke up in the middle of the night, paralyzed.
I woke up and I waited until someone was awake.
And what'd you tell him?
That I can't move my legs.
Dan's parents rushed him to Tufts Medical Center in Boston. He was hospitalized for the next 49 days. Do you remember how they told it to you or what they said?
They didn't expect him to ever walk again. They didn't expect him to have the use of his legs again. And that was, we were just destroyed. You know, we were devastated when we heard that, but they were more concerned like that he wouldn't even be able to breathe on his own when they were telling us this.
Alarming reports surfaced around the country. Respiratory illnesses so severe, many children ended up on mechanical ventilators. Some lost use of their limbs. Colin Lopez, an athletic teen in Oregon, suddenly paralyzed. Another child, Mackenzie Anderson, paralyzed from the neck down. Doctors say the patients had one thing in common: a virus called enterovirus D68, or EVD68, the dark circles in this microscopic image.
When they found out that everybody was having this enterovirus, then people got together and tried to figure out why this happened.
Dr. Scott Schroeder is a pediatric specialist at Tufts Floating Hospital for Children, where Dan was admitted. He says EVD68 is in the same family as one of the most feared viruses, polio.
It's of the same family, but the polio is like the black sheep of the family, and the enterovirus is just the nasty cousin that, doesn't do what it should do.
It was the similarities to polio that chilled scientists to the bone. At its worst, polio killed 3,000 and paralyzed 21,000 Americans in a single year back in 1952. Now, 35 years after polio was eradicated in the U.S., doctors urgently sought to learn why a distant cousin had reared its ugly head in such a toxic form. In September of 2014, the CDC issued an alert.
So far, no deaths attributed to EVD68 infection have been documented.
Almost unheard of in the U.S. until now, but seen in Europe, Asia, and Central America, had people carried EVD68 into the U.S. from other countries. If the CDC had answers, it wasn't saying. The government watchdog group Judicial Watch was among those filing a Freedom of Information request to try to get more information from the CDC. Judicial Watch Director of Investigations Chris Farrell says his group is still waiting for a response from CDC more than a year later.
It's extraordinary. There's usually some effort to produce something, but in this case, silence from the part of the government. There's no accountability. There's no explanation to the public with respect to a public health crisis and the outbreak. And that is a disconnect. It doesn't make sense.
CDC's September 2014 statement was the last time it would address the outbreak on camera, yet things were about to get much worse.
Eli say, crocodile.
5 days later, Eli Waller, seen in this home video with his triplet sisters, became the first to die.
It was a bolt out of the blue. I mean, that's really what it was.
Andy Waller of Hamilton, New Jersey, said his 4-year-old son Eli seemed perfectly fine when he went to bed, but he never woke up.
There really wasn't anything, that would indicate that he was susceptible to anything like this.
Sid, you want to try this?
Though EVD68 can be spread with a cough or sneeze, his sisters were unscathed. It all raised more questions than it answered, and the Wallers found facts hard to come by.
We were just running around, going from doctor to lab to next doctor to here and there, and we didn't have a handle of what was going on. It's like a thing that's out in the world. So that was the extent, really, of the information we got.
After Eli, others lost their lives. Madeline Reed, a toddler in Michigan. Emily Otrondo, a 10-year-old in Rhode Island. The outbreak that CDC wasn't anxious to talk about on camera was far more pervasive and deadly than one getting lots of attention, the measles at Disneyland.
Bottom line on measles, it can be a serious disease.
By way of comparison, the Disneyland measles affected 143 people in 8 states with no deaths. EVD68 seriously sickened more than 1,200 children in every state. 120 were paralyzed and 14 died.
You don't want to see anything like this ever happen to anyone.
Eli's favorite dog in Paw Patrol.
Today, Eli is missed. His family tries to keep grief at bay.
And early on, we really determined, if things can happen like that, we just got to make the most out of every little moment that we get with them. I tickle you every day.
As for Dan, his left leg remains partially paralyzed and other limbs are weak, but he's defied predictions, going from wheelchair to walker to this. He's even managed enough balance to get back out on the family fishing boat.
I caught almost a 500-pound tuna. I steered the boat while my dad veered it in.
He loves to be on the boat. And he ran the boat while we fought the fish and harpooned it, and he was so excited about that.
This season, the CDC is reporting sporadic paralysis cases, but won't say how many and won't talk to us on camera about the mystery disease. And frontline researchers are still looking for answers. Why is it that some children get so sick and some even die from it?
That is the million-dollar question, is why some people get something, why some people don't. That's the thing that keeps me up at night, is how can we separate and determine who are the ones who are going to be more susceptible.
The CDC recently told me it would be at least 9 months more before it would be able to reply to my first of 2 Freedom of Information requests about this filed a year ago, even though the law requires a response in 20 days. Sadly, while everyone hoped the paralysis in the affected kids would be temporary, the latest studies indicate most of the children have minimal to no improvement. Only 2 of the 120 have recovered. But first, a story of incredible waste of your tax dollars. Since 2002, the U.S. has given more than $116 billion to help rebuild Afghanistan. In 2012, President Obama appointed investigator John Sopko to lead the job of policing waste, fraud, and abuse in that spending. This is the story of what happened when some generals on the ground at a U.S. military base tipped Sopko off to the strange circumstances surrounding a building project called 64K.
It was the best built building I had seen and still have seen in Afghanistan.
Inspector General John Sopko is talking about his tour of this building, bigger than a football field, shown on satellite photos at the U.S. military's Camp Leatherneck in south-central Afghanistan.
It's a beautiful building. It was well done. Fully furnished. It was huge, 64,000 approximately square feet.
Nicknamed 64K because of its size, Congress intended it to be headquarters for the 2010 U.S. military surge of 30,000 troops to fight Taliban Islamic extremists. There was just one problem.
The Marine commander, the general in the ground running the surge, said, "I don't want it, I don't need it, don't build it." And 2 other generals above him said the same thing. Don't build it. We don't need it. We already have a headquarters. It's a waste of money.
Yet the project moved forward, a facility designed to be big enough for a staff of 1,200, complete with a war room and briefing theater. But 64K never served as a surge headquarters. In fact, it was still under construction when the surge ended in 2012. Yet U.S. tax dollars continued to pour in for upgrades. $3 million for audio and video electronics, another $500,000 for a video teleconference suite. Can you explain the mindset on a project that nobody wants anyway and is probably not going to be used, in which they keep upgrading it?
It is indicative of a problem in Afghanistan that we see time and again. You have the money, spend it. And that is the problem, not only in Afghanistan and not only with the military. It's a problem, I think, with the entire government. Once money is appropriated, you just spend it.
Sopko puts the total cost of the project, including roads and utilities, at $36 million.
My left ear is the worst one.
That kind of waste has real meaning to Rick Helsley, a Marine Corps veteran who served in Afghanistan.
It's very frustrating because it's a constant struggle, especially active duty. I have friends that are working extra jobs on top of being in the military, trying to make ends meet. I have veteran friends that are scrounging the bottom of the barrel.
He's now attending college, working a security job, and struggling to get by with service-related disabilities that he says include back and hearing problems.
I read about them trying to cut active duty members' benefits and everything else, but they can go spend $30-some-odd million on a building that nobody even needs.
Sopko, too, wanted to know just why 64K got built. Tipped off by generals on the ground, he sank his teeth into the mystery, only to feel stonewalled. In emails, Colonel Norman Allen, a senior military lawyer, told fellow officers he wanted to slow-roll responses to the Inspector General's questions. When Sopko directed them to preserve documents, Colonel Allen emailed, "I don't know that he has authority to tell us to do that."
We found that very discouraging because it bordered on obstruction of our investigation.
Colonel Allen didn't respond to our interview requests. In writing, he said he never sought to interfere with the investigation and took strong exception to allegations that he did. SOPCO still managed to get a lot of evidence. Exhibit A came from Commander Larry Nicholson, lead general at Camp Leatherneck when 64K was commissioned.
My expectations for you are very high.
Nicholson had said in military emails, "I was greatly surprised, as were my colonels, to see that the 64K project had been initiated. We were very pleased with the current headquarters. I am confident that neither I or any of my team asked for, signed for, or formally or informally requested a new future headquarters for my successors." In May, SOPCO released his findings and finally identified who reversed the generals on the ground to give 64K the green light.
We found out that there was a general who was stationed in Kuwait.
Major General Pete Van Gel.
General Van Gel made a decision that since the money had been appropriated, a supplemental appropriation from Congress, that it would not have been prudent to give the money back even though you didn't need it. So basically, it was his decision.
Van Gel, now retired, declined our interview request, but disputed the findings. He said 64K addressed an operational need and the project was in line with the military strategic intent. The Pentagon defended Van Gel's decision as prudent and said Camp Leatherneck was being considered as a potential enduring location for the military until the Obama administration decided to pull out of Afghanistan. If you could tell someone who built that building, the general who said, "Go ahead," what would you say to him?
Why exactly did you spend $36 million on a building that nobody wanted or needed when there's so many other things you could have spent that money on?
In October of last year, the U.S. handed the brand new vacant 64K over to the Afghans, who discovered it was wired for U.S. electricity, not what they use, and found it too expensive to fully occupy.
That's the 64K. A wasted building, basically a 64,000 square foot white elephant in the desert that's probably going to deteriorate and fall down eventually because the Afghans cannot sustain it.
Today, 64K stands as a monument to wasted military construction dollars. Probably the nicest facility the U.S. ever built, but never occupied in all of Afghanistan, courtesy of American taxpayers. The Pentagon rejected all of SOPCO's recommendations for discipline, saying the officers involved did nothing wrong. And a final note, the millions of tax dollars to build 64K didn't even benefit a U.S. company, but a British contractor. Now we turn to green energy and taxpayer waste, running on E. The Recovery Act, or so-called stimulus plan, devoted more than $36 billion tax dollars to clean energy ideas, including electric vehicles. At this week's Global Climate Change Summit in Paris, President Obama said all that money has done a lot of good.
I came into office, I prioritized clean energy. I said we're going to double our clean energy production through the Recovery Act. So we made a big investment, and it turned out that we met our goals a lot quicker than we expected.
Well, it turns out not all of the president's goals have been met a lot quicker. Take the billions of tax dollars spent trying to put 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2015. We begin with a success story, Tesla Motors. In 2010, Tesla got a taxpayer loan of nearly $500 million to help make this possible.
This is Model S, the world's first premium all-electric sedan.
The Model S electric vehicle. Equipped with what Tesla calls ludicrous mode, it can shoot from 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. Strong sales helped Tesla pay back its government loan early. That's exactly how the Obama administration hoped things would turn out when it announced plans to jumpstart an electric car revolution in 2011.
We can break our dependence on oil with biofuels and become the first country to have 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2015.
But success hinged on spending lots of your tax money, $7.5 billion over 10 years. Some went to sweeten the deal for consumers buying electric cars like the Volkswagen e-Golf.
Took a loop through the neighborhood.
Okay. We took one for a test drive in Boston. If I wanted to buy this vehicle, what kind of benefits could I get?
Well, there's a $7,500 federal tax incentive, and there's also the state of Massachusetts has a $2,500 tax
So I could,
incentive.
in essence, get basically $10,000
Oh,
off the
absolutely.
cost of the car.
Oh, yeah.
Greg Sullivan helped root out taxpayer waste as the Inspector General for Massachusetts. Now at the Pioneer think tank in Boston, he's researched the government's electric car efforts. The president hoped to get over 1 million vehicles on the road by the end of this year. Why were they so confident that this could be done?
I think that they hoped that the very, very large incentives would kind of start a movement, but it didn't happen. If you have a car that only gets 80 miles on a charge and it takes many hours to charge that car, it ends up costing more than a regular car. Those are all deal killers for regular people.
To get to 1 million electric cars, the White House relied on sales of 11 models. Its projections turned out to be wildly optimistic. A case in point, Fisker Automotive. In 2010, Fisker got a $500 million taxpayer loan. Vice President Joe Biden joined a big celebration at the old GM plant in Delaware, where Fisker was to start production and provide a bonanza of new jobs.
We're going to make sure the middle class has their piece of the economy.
When Fisker made the big announcement, with the state officials, federal officials, everybody was excited.
Antonio Prado is Director of Communications in Newcastle County, where the Fisker plant is located.
It didn't turn out the way everybody wanted it to.
How it did turn out was a prime example of technology not yet ready for prime time, as illustrated by the disastrous Consumer Reports test of Fisker's pride and joy, the Karma.
This is Consumer Reports Fisker Karma. It cost us over $100,000. It is low, it is sleek, it is sensuous. It's also broken, right here in the middle of our driveway.
Fisker blamed the car's faulty lithium-ion battery. That only served to highlight another lesson in the government's misplaced faith. The bad battery was built by A123, who'd also gotten a taxpayer loan worth $249 million. Both Fisker and A123 soon went bankrupt and were bought by the same Chinese firm. And the Delaware plant remained idle.
I think it was about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years after the announcement was made that people started asking questions like, hey, when is this going to happen?
Today, it's just a 3.2 million square foot ghost factory with weeds growing through the cracks in the pavement. All those jobs never materialized. Tom Gordon is the top official in Newcastle County. He blames in part a struggling middle class for disappointing electric vehicle sales.
It costs more money to drive an electric car. They're going to be more worried about how they're going to feed their families. You're not going to sell electric cars even on the West Coast right now.
In the end, Fisker built just a tiny fraction of the number of cars the Obama administration counted on before going out of business. 2 years after Obama's announcement, 6 of the 11 relied upon electric vehicle models had already stopped production or gone belly up, making it nearly impossible to meet the goal.
The goal was to put 1 million cars on the road, electric cars on the road by 2015. And we're about 1/3, they met about 1/3 of that goal.
There are promising developments on the horizon. Tesla and Panasonic are joining to develop a better electric car battery, and the concept of green vehicles remains hot, even if sales aren't.
It's a great goal, and they do reduce greenhouse emissions, no question. Problem is, the government got ahead of itself by giving multi-billion-dollar incentive for people to buy cars, but the cars that they were kind of coercing them into buying really weren't practical.
The Obama administration declined our interview request, but a spokesman for the Energy Department told us the U.S. will still eventually be the first country in the world to have 1 million electric vehicles on the road. Quote, this transformation, even if met later than targeted, will reduce Americans' dependence on petroleum, make transportation more sustainable while creating jobs and stimulating economic growth.